On the Massachusetts Marine who went missing while swimming. The 4th Marine Aircraft Wing has received notification this evening regarding Samuel Wanjiru's disappearance off the coast of Puerto Rico while visiting the island with friends. He's a reserve Marine assigned to the MWSS 72 Marine Aircraft Group 49, 4th Marine Aircraft Wing in Chicopee, Massachusetts. Now, Wanjiru is a native of Worcester and serves as a motor vehicle operator with MWSS 472. At the time of his disappearance, he wasn't in an active duty status or conducting military operations. The Marines say they are in contact with his family, local authorities, and the U.S. Coast Guard while the search for him continues.